Today we're going to talk about the different options you have with sharpening medium, and then I'm going to tell you why I chose Waterstones in general and why I chose the Sharpen Pros in particular. I know you're busy, let's get started. Okay, in the world of sharpening medium, there are basically four choices. You've got Waterstones, Oilstones, Diamonds, and Sandpaper. Those are really the only four I looked at seriously when I was trying to decide. So why wouldn't I use Oilstones? Oilstones are extremely hard. And that can be a plus when you're sharpening freehand. But the downside of that is it takes longer to resurface the stone, and because it's harder, it doesn't cut as fast. Some people would argue that Oilstones are messy, but if you've seen my Waterstones, you'll see that they're pretty messy as well. I don't think that's a reason to choose one over the other. Maybe there's a slight edge to Waterstones there because if you were to clean them every time you use them, you wouldn't need to use soap and water, and you wouldn't have to worry about clogging the stone up with soap and then having to resaturate it with oil. So there's a slight edge to Waterstones there, but I wouldn't say that cleanliness is a reason not to buy one or the other. All right, expense. Natural Oilstones can be expensive, but so can natural Waterstones. As far as the synthetics go, there's a similar price range for really crummy Oilstones and Waterstones all the way up to the really nice Oilstones and Waterstones that are synthetic. So if you have a price point, there's a Waterstone or an Oilstone out there to meet it. And I can't say that in a given price range there's really advantage to one over the other. So why not use diamond stones? Well, I do use diamond stones, but I only use my diamond lapping plate to lap my Waterstones. Diamonds are extremely hard, but the substrate that they're mounted on is not. So if you're not extremely careful with how you sharpen on that diamond plate, you're going to be scraping the diamonds right off. And the layer of diamonds, because they're so expensive, is usually quite thin. So you don't have a lot of room to play there. Now, if you take really good care of your diamond stones, they'll last a very long time, but they do wear out. So don't think that you're going to be able to keep a diamond plate forever. On the messy, clean side, diamond stones are definitely cleaner. You can use soap and water as a lubrication medium. You can use them dry if you want, but they do work better if you have a fluid to carry the swarf off as you're sharpening. So now we're down to sandpaper. Sandpaper is definitely the cheapest option. And if you are just getting into sharpening and you don't want to invest in the stones, sandpaper is probably the best way to go. It behaves just like a diamond plate or a Waterstone. You need to be careful not to dig the chisel or the plane iron into it as you're sharpening. But you'll find that over time you'll get tired of changing sandpaper and you'll be spending a bunch of money on sandpaper because it doesn't last. And you'll probably end up coming back to this same decision point, whether to go with Oilstones, Waterstones, or diamond stones. So if you really, really need to save a buck, get the sandpaper and get sharpening. That's the most important thing. But if you can afford it, I would say buy some good Waterstones and just forget about it. All right, so let's talk about the aspects of Waterstones that are unique. Waterstones are meant to wear. They are soft because you want to be exposing fresh media to the tool that you're sharpening as quickly as possible. So instead of clogging, they tend to wear off. Now, that can be an issue if you don't plan on flattening the stones, and it's not a big process to flatten the stones. I probably get 2 or 3 sharpenings out of each stone before I have to flatten it, and that process only takes a few seconds between sharpenings. So flattening is really not a big deal other than the initial expense of buying the diamond plate. Some of the traditional objections to using Waterstones are that they're too soft. Well, we've talked about why that's actually a feature. That can lead to weakness when they get thin, but that's why I've got these backer plates on them. Another objection is, I don't have water in my shop. Well, neither do I. I just bring water in a spray bottle, and I wet the stones down and go to work sharpening. Now that is a feature that's not true of all Waterstones. Some Waterstones have to be soaked, and that can be filed under the category of why I chose this particular set of stones. If you are using Waterstones and you have a shop that can freeze, you want to be really careful not to leave them in the shop overnight. Even if they're just saturated with water but not sitting in a puddle, that water can freeze and crack the stones apart. The last hurdle I had to jump over with my mind with Waterstones is the fact that I was using water with steel. and I know that those two don't mix. The first thing you're going to do after you finish sharpening is dry off the tool. And you should be putting a layer of oil, a coating of oil, on just about every tool you use right after you sharpen it or handle it or use it. So if you're not putting oil on the metal to keep it protected from rust, you're wiping off salt from your skin and other oils from your skin to keep for the same reason. So let's talk about these specific stones. These are the Sharpen Ha no Kuromaku. They're made in Japan. They're synthetic stones. The grits that I use are 1,000, 5,000, and 8,000. So they're sold also by color, so this would be the orange, wine, and melon stones. These stones cut faster than any other water stone I've tried. And the great thing about them is they don't have to be soaked. You can spray them and you can sharpen, and that's certainly not the case with most water stones out there. When I first started woodworking, I bought a cheaper stone that was a two-sided stone. It had to be soaked, and I was constantly keeping up with changing the water out in the soaking pan and making sure I didn't leave it in the shop overnight when it was cold. It was a pretty big hassle. So I'm really happy to have these stones I can just spray down and go to work. And of course, now I'm in a heated shop, so the soaking and the freezing aren't as big an issue, but it's nice to not have to worry about it if the power goes out. And the only real drawback to these stones, to the water stones in general, is that their softness, which makes it really great for fast sharpening, also makes them weak when they start to get thin. So I highly suggest putting some sort of hard backer plate on there. For 25 bucks, this thing is cheap insurance for, you know, a $100 stone. And I think it's worth every penny you spend to put them on there. And, you know, if you ever wear through a stone, which does happen, it's easier if you don't back them. They tend to break before you wear them out. But if you ever happen to wear through a stone, the plate is reusable. You can get another piece of adhesive and glue the next stone on in its place. Just as a reminder, these videos are not sponsored, so you don't have to worry about product placement. You can get the stone, both the stones and the backer plates from sharpeningsupplies.com, and you can get the stones from Lee Valley Veritas. In the next video, we'll talk about all the little accessories you need to take care of these stones and to use them for sharpening.